So welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see you today for another exciting discussion in our series on the future of work, HCI and the future of work. I wanted to, before we start, quickly recognize the National Science Foundation as they're partially supporting this effort, and also the organizers, Linda Boyle, John Lee, Rafael Sadoun, or chair who's here with me today, Manfred Chalagi. And logistics-wise, this is a recorded conversation. And please put your questions in the chat where I think or it will be moderating. So I'm very excited to welcome Susanne Boll, who's a friend over many, many years and collaborator. So thank you, Susanne, for joining us. Susanne is a professor of media informatics and multimedia systems at the Department of Computer Science at the University of Oldenburg. And I wanted to mention two things. First of all, I'd like to congratulate, and please join me in congratulating Susanne. She became a fellow of the German Informatics Society today. So congratulations, wonderful recognition. And Susanne is also taking time to do this today with us, even though she is the co-general chair of Mobile HCI, which is starting in, I don't know, 48 hours. It's next week. Yeah, so again, thank you very much for joining us today. So Susanne, let me jump right in. So you and your team just recently completed a course
Yes.
with a focus on making and tinkering in teams. And this is not a new course for you, right? But this is the first time that you taught this during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what it means to have a team is now different. There was the social distancing at best and actually working from home really at worst. So this is what I wanted to discuss today with you. How do you think about these experiences and the innovation? So I guess the first question I wanted to ask is about the goals. So what did you hope that the students will learn in this modified course? And what are some of the things that perhaps you were willing to give up in comparison to the course where people meet in person?
Yeah, thank you. I think it was probably also the moment of a surprise to all of us that it would be sort of closing so quickly and the entire term would be with social distancing and no access to the university and lab spaces. So the first reaction was that we had to do two things. Was one, the university team sort of also we had to remotely plan this because we couldn't also meet, and then we had to see what is the maximum we can offer the students in such a term. And I think the minimum we were thinking was maybe they could at least do quick and dirty electronics. So something that they can maybe use breadboards, use a basic starter kit with electronics. So they would have something to hold on that we can actually offer to all students, give it them to home, and then run one physical prototyping, hardware-oriented project on that, so that actually I had to say I didn't expect much, which it sounds a little bit unfair to the students, but it was a very demanding situation. And we were very excited that we came up with the idea of sort of just packing everything, shipping it to the students, doing our best in weekly, helping them through the course to hope that they at least get some idea and also some fun in designing, prototyping, and also maybe a little bit of trying out such a hardware physical prototype or physical computing system. That was the minimum plan. What we gave up in the beginning was the question that the students could do laser cutting themselves and could do 3D printing themselves, which we were still able to do some. So I'll come maybe at some point also to the assignment that we have given the students, but we gave them a preset of existing things to cut. They could engineer or design their own printing and also carving out and so on layout. And we were sure that one of our student assistants and teaching assistants and one of the my PhDs could take this over. So it was submitted, it was then cut in that situation, and was then again shipped or delivered to the students. So we were hoping we do some little of that. And the same with 3D printing. So giving them access, and we were able or were willing to put the effort that on our side, my team would be willing to do all of this, print it on their own, be alone in the digital fabrication lab, ship it or email it. And we also were lucky that I have enough funding around to just be able to buy all the material in 15 times to send it to the students.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's one interesting question here is about what to give up is the skills that do come with, 3D printing. But I guess that's not the only skill that they end up acquiring in a course like this. So
yeah, I think that was something we were, maybe I can talk about this later, but I think it worked even better than we were thinking in the beginning.
How's that? Did you want to say now or?
No, just continue. I think we will have time for, you want a conversation.
Okay.
We want to have me all talking all the time.
So you talked about this a little bit about the constraints that were put on you with having to work from home. So I don't know if you wanted to maybe give us a little more insight into how you overcame the constraints.
So what was really, and I really have to say, we was really lucky for us that we had been thinking of a physical computing makers project independent of that class, with which we were planning a hackathon. And that had the idea that everybody gets the same starting point of a so-called puzzle box or treasure box or riddle box, in which to make it doable, everybody would get the same box already cut out in the beginning. So you have a clear constraint. So everybody gets a 20 centimeter squarish box, and this is going to be your treasure box. So the starting point was the same. And we thought that this would be very good for the students for two reasons. One, we can produce it. We are in control so that we can also handle it in interaction with the students. And on the other hand, it would be a fair ground. Everybody starts at the same point. Everybody has to do the same assignment. And it would be fairer to those who maybe didn't have much experience. That way would have a good starting point instead of thinking of their own project, because in previous years students could pick and choose their own topic, but that gave such a variety. We were not sure if we could very well supervise this with guiding all the students to a more or less similar or good experience. So I think that one constraint was starting with the same basic kit, both the assignment. So the goal was to have a squarish puzzle box. Each side, it's a wooden box, should host an electronic based riddle with sensors and actuators. And finally, you could open up sort of the treasure box and find something inside. And the second constraint is that everybody got the same Arduino based electronics kit. So it was also a good starting point for everyone. And we wanted to make sure that we sort of meet them really every week to make sure we're not losing anyone on that journey. And this has really paid off very, very well. What we did technically was also interesting. Sort of we were using Microsoft Teams at that time. It was a tool we had available, and we were thinking if it would be good to pack everyone into that, because before that students would just enter the university's kind of learning platform, which we have, but not an interactive space. So we decided in favor of Microsoft Teams because we thought you have everything in one spot. You could also do chatting. So in the university tool, that's not so bad, but I think it doesn't have everything packed. And here we had one tool. Everybody registered. There was a space to upload documents. There was a space to chat. There was a separate and closed space for the students where they could interact. So I found it more doable, and it also had a good video presentation quality. And then I wanted to make the students feel also comfortable of an informal chat, of showing their faces, showing the camera picture. And that also has paid off very well.
So very nice. So that is sort of a segue into my next question is, how did it go? What did the students think, and what did your team think? And, would you do it again? Would
yes,
you like
absolutely.
To teach like this again?
I was, whenever I look back to that, I have the feeling I smiled from the very first weeks, I was there every time. That was also actually something new to my student. I have to admit that. So I heard that there were side comments. Someone said, oh, now she's every time present. Because before that, once in a while, you have to travel. You go to Kai, you're a week away. So now of course, I was actually eager to do it, and I feel definitely also interested, also obliged to really sort of bring my students through that difficult times. So I was probably present almost at all the times. It was also noticed. That was very interesting. And from the very first few weeks, it was very exciting to see. We gave out different, now the one task to everyone, but we very quickly got different themes back. So the fear that we would get like a boring course where everybody does more or less the same thing with the box, this was not true. It was a treasure box from Hernan Comtesse, and they found our story, and there was this secret house, and it was really beautiful to see how quickly they came up with that concept. So the students really liked it, but it was very demanding. So our term was actually shortened by 2 weeks. So it started 2 weeks later, but there was no extension. And even though the students always told you that they learned a lot, that they liked the tinkering, that they liked this creativity to show their results, and sometimes we even had to stop them from doing even more. That was really amazing, but definitely they did too much. That is definitely clear. And at the end, we did an interview also with the students. They were at home, they had nothing else to do, or they couldn't go out. And also they had this very practical task that was hanging above them as a to-do. You know, they wanted to go make progress in the prototyping and in maybe hardware refinements. So you could really see that they felt really into it, but it cost them a lot of time, and they were absolutely underestimating of the integration part when they try to put the different side of the box together into one systems. So I would definitely teach this again. I admire the students because the results in the boxes that we saw, and they're still actually in the students' home because we wanted to make a physical meeting when we are allowed to do this in a larger room. But it's beautiful boxes. It has highly refined visuals. It has highly refined, some group also did like a 3D printed vault where you have to enter the different keys. I was surprised. I had the feeling I've never run a more exciting course than that one. That was really cool.
That's good to hear. So let me ask a broader question, and that is, how does this relate to the topic of this conversation series, which is the future of work? So do you think we can learn something specifically about this idea of having to share physical resources between people who are actually remote and not able to come together?
Yeah, I think there's several things we have learned where we think we could do this. As of course, practically, it was clear around that there's maker kits that you can buy at home, and I think some after school projects have been doing this. But it was clear that if we want, we can really do bigger hardware prototyping boxes and give it to students. You know, there's no reason why they have to come to the lab per se, given that there's other benefits from going to the lab. But practically, if someone couldn't join, couldn't travel, couldn't access sort of your university, why not send them this material? It's a question, of course, of money. You have to buy it, you know, the funds have to be there. But that's something that is clear. It is doable. Everybody thought at the beginning, how do you run an electronics course remotely? But it's doable. And I think that is something we can learn, that all the kits that we have are available. We maybe should better shared lists of what is good for which course. So if we all are working on this, it would be good to create resources, not saying you could buy this here and you could buy that there, but really make a nice collection saying this has worked well for me, and this was all the material I bought, and this was all the experiences I made. I think that would be helpful. We have been doing this actually for schools in a Calliope project where we did courses on how to make your backpack magically doing something. And I think, but this course for me showed it is doable also on a master level. What I would also say in HCI, what is still not solved, but it has been addressed in HCI, is how do we actually share our results? So I can show one of the backgrounds I was thinking of showing here. So it was very interesting. sort of how the students would show their results. And then, you know, you get a camera image of someone waving a prototype in front of their camera, you know, and it was nice, you know, it was not an issue. But even though we have seen in computer-supported cooperative work sort of setups where you have something on the top and some separate camera here, it's not standard. You still have to set it up yourself. So if you had with the box also like a little studio where you can easily share, where like one person is actually working on the prototype, you facing a camera, and the other student you are working with can see it. I think it's not saying that the HCI or computer-supported collaborative work has done it, but it's the question is, do we have it as a, you know, box you just unbox and then that it's it. I think that was actually something I was also talking to my team. I think we should be working also on offering the studio setting in which you can work and not only the material, that because that was very, very difficult for the students to show. And it was also for us a pity that we couldn't, well, we had always had the feeling we want to touch it, and it was not there. For the students also the question, what are the tools they can do easily show a prototype, you know? Again, you know, there's a lot of tools around there for creating snippets, creating nice presentations, but we ended up using a lot of PowerPoint presentation in which little video snippets were integrated. But I think we could definitely have better tools for that maybe also better integrate, you know, it's again there, but it has not been used as a collection just for this, and it's also not shippable where you just say, okay, just download this and then here you are. I think we had previous discussions also here. Of course, there's this thing, I think, hug your laptop, so you can turn your laptop around and you show something. But I think HCI could definitely think of having tools and boxes that support this better. On a broader experience, I would also say we need to be careful on how we teach this. Because in class, you have so much conversations with the students, you can shape it, form it, support it in much more like in a closer and better way. But if you're remote, you just see that team and that is presenting and then it goes away. You don't see the team working and chatting and exchanging. But I think it needs, from our experience, a much stronger guidance of what to do each week, what to support each week, what to watch each week. You know, that is clear that this video would be very helpful if you watch it this week. It would be helpful if you do it a week in advance. You should do only 2 hours in trying this out and not 6 hours. You know, I think that is much easier in lab. And I think for us, it appeared to be much less in this remote situation, and also the students needed a much higher self-discipline. So I would, for the next course, really create a stronger, yeah, maybe call it a syllabus that not only talks about the expectations and what to have to assign to, but also on what is a good approach of doing it. And what would I recommend you doing in week 1, also with regard to your hourly effort. That is something we really learned. And I saw, as I said, the excellent results also came with a high price on the students' effort on that. And the tools we are using were, well, Microsoft Teams is one. I think there's other tools around, but it would also be good that we have best practices. Again, you know, what is good for what has worked. So listing up 10 tools you could use is not helpful, but it would be better to see, okay, what has worked somewhere else, what was good, what was bad. For example, you know, if you use PowerPoint integrated in Microsoft Teams, it naturally works well because it's the same brand, you know. But of the other side, some students used YouTube videos only. Others were chatting outside in the WhatsApp group. So I think it would be good if you also help the students of what tools would be good for them and also for interacting with us. They can still choose, but it would be good to help them also in this process of what makes a good conversation. Yeah, I think that was it's a wide, so I wouldn't say that HCI has not produced contributions, but I think they need to be applied and curated for physical remote computing classes.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that I personally have lots of kind of thoughts and have been taking notes, but I see that a lot of activity from the audience with questions. So maybe we can start addressing some of the questions. Chris, do you want to go first?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Hi, Suzanne. I was mostly wondering about some practical aspects. So you so partially was covered, the background of the students were master students, but I was wondering, well, what master's program were these? Like, did they have experience with some of these techniques? And I was also wondering about what your thoughts are on how this would scale. So if your group size would change much over the years, I'm not sure whether that applies to your programs, but could you have done it with like 30 students? Because now you had like 15, I think you said.
Yes, I would say yes. Let me just pick out a few other pictures. I would say this is just a question of money. I don't think it's not doable. I think the material needs to be bought. I think that is something new to universities, that they have to ship it in that numbers, because before that the students would have a team pack. You know, it was 3 students working on one project and they would get 1 box. Now I had to buy a box for everyone to make sure they get it home. I'm not saying that is not doable. Probably you have to talk about the university structure and funding, where maybe there might be universities in the world where this is no way. And other universities say, well, this is not the problem. And it's also the question of supervision. So I have enough teaching assistant and student assistants around that could also help with this prototyping and any kind of technical support. It was computer science students and a master program which is called social technical engineering, and this is actually also students from psychology background, so I think that worked pretty well. It was doable, and I had students who said, I think there was also the students that did this kind of cabling, so this looks really probably almost frightening because it also has to be with cables. And she said is really like from a 0 to 150%. But she said no, she learned a lot. I think I would say it's doable with even a good technical background, but I don't see that it's necessary that you have to really be a deep programmer, because you have to be careful. You know, the number of programming lines with Arduino, that is not big. You know, it's not a huge program. It's more on the bringing everything together. I would say it scales if you have sufficient supervision and sufficient boxes. Of course, probably it's not going to scale so easily to 100 students, but I think 30, I wouldn't mind. 100,
thanks. Yeah, that's a
maybe not.
Pretty big scale increase. Thanks, Suzanne.
Yeah, so perhaps related to the question of how to support students with different backgrounds, Diana, would you like to ask your question about troubleshooting?
Sure. So in this sort of remote environment, how do you tackle remote collaboration? And a little different from Annabelle's question, I was wondering specifically when you have TAs and students, how do you deal with the troubleshooting aspect of it? Because a lot of this work is troubleshooting. Sometimes, yeah.
Well, from what I understood it was actually not enough used, actually. So the students had the offer that my PhD student, who was really eager and supportive and offering, you know, was not asked often enough to actually use the support. So of course it's always a team of 3. So we all do all of our projects and assignments in teams of 3, that you have in your team already a good support of, oh, I try to solve it, or I have the same problem, or let's solve it together. So the troubleshooting has worked very well, and the TA and also my PhD student was, also the TA is also a master student. They were very supportive and sending tutorials and links and everything. So the troubleshooting was not a problem. What we would ask next time is that we make almost obligatory troubleshooting weekly meetings. So it was always like offered, but then there wasn't much request, and it seems that the student have actually done it on themselves. I would maybe make it a little bit more obligatory, that the students come and that they don't feel, okay, I can't manage it, I can't solve the problems, what does it mean? so that they really use it. And what was also good with the virtual course, for example, with the quick and dirty prototyping, was that you have synchronous and asynchronous work. So for example, quick and dirty prototyping, we all had these boxes and so on. So we started out together, then all the teams went and did some prototyping in their apartment, like single. At that time, they were all in there. There was a full lockdown or like an almost lockdown situation. And then they came back up and showed it. And then they could go back and then do a little bit more at home. So I think the synchronous and asynchronous even had a benefit. Whereas for us, our quick and dirty prototyping were joint sessions, 10, 15 students in the same room, a very lot of liveliness and creativities and sort of material sort of flying over the table. That was missing. But the other hand was that the students had much more time and the and creativity on to build that. But troubleshooting, yeah, it's difficult. They managed, but I would next time try to find ways or incentives that they use it more often. It was not a question of our offer. It was a question of, it was, in my view, it could have been used more often. I hope it answers the question. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think it answers some of, like in addition to that, I think it answered some of the additional questions. I want to go back to Florian, which will probably be our concluding question from the audience before we move to a more informal setting. Florian?
Yes, so thank you very much for this nice conversation and also for the positivity. I think there's a lot of problems at the moment with COVID and so on, but it looks like you did very well with your course. So I'm just wondering, if you would go back to normal, and we hopefully do it sometime, what would you still keep? What's your learning? What would be still valuable in a regular physical setting that you have in class as an addition from this experience?
Well, yeah, I think I would definitely mix it, because because before that it was a question, of course, you would get the thing and you would come to the lab, you know. I think that was how it was done, and it was also considered good. But I think I might very carefully saying, okay, we do something here, so bring your box, whatever, you know, something you can transport on a bicycle, you know, Oldenburg is a bicycle city. But then you can also take it home. I would also say, if a student in the future say, you know, I cannot come to class this week, I'm happy to present remotely because I have a good reason. You know, we have maybe someone with family or a personal a situation where this is necessary. I think we would be much more relaxed and much more brave on exploring these two sides. I think I wouldn't have thought I would be so relaxed. So why don't you sort of, I just pick up the box and you know, we never ask if we will actually get it back. I'm pretty confident we will, but this was never, they have never to sign something, you know, if they would bring it back. It was just a very confident. So I think I would definitely keep some of the elements that they could get the material, that they could also work on this alone, because before that it was also a question that the team had to meet. This was a constraint sometimes for them, depending on the individual's rhythms. Also maybe family and other things. So now if you give everyone a back box, you could say, okay, you can have your private tinkering phases where you explore in your time, when you have time. When you meet the group, then you can maybe each bring your thing, or everybody could come to one place and there's everything already there. I think it would be probably allow for a much more flexible work of local, remote, synchronous and asynchronous things. I was also thinking if we should do something before the term, but that may be a little bit unfair, you know, because the term in Germany and in most of the states is 14 weeks, and you're not supposed to give pre-term tasks. But it could be an option thinking, why don't I give you this box 3 weeks in advance? You know, you can have a look. You might Google a little bit around you. I can send you some tutorials. That is something that we are not so strict again of this 14 weeks window, and we see how much we can extend it without putting additional load to the students, but with sort of that they could benefit from that. But I would definitely keep it, and I'm really eager to run a remote hackathon, also like a 2-3 day thing with it, and see how well that works, and to see if it's also could be offered as what we call a block course. So how would it work better if we do just in 2 weeks, where they have plenty of time, an hour a week. That could also be an option, but I definitely keep stuff of that. I could, if I see something is not working well, now you feel extremely relaxed, saying, okay, I can record at midnight something for them, a video, and then just send it to them. Before that, you always had the feeling, oh yeah, you have to be in class, you have to be present there. There was this present time. I think for me, even though I could have done it probably earlier, it is so much more, it's that braveness, sort of going forward, saying, well, let's try out much more of this and find solutions how we can all be good teachers, balance work-life time also maybe a bit, and enjoy synchronous and asynchronous modes.
Thank you. Good questions, and then an exciting topic for all of us. I wanted to mention that Susanne and her team wrote an article for IEEE Pervasive Computing, the education and training department that I oversee, and soon you'll be able to read about these experiences there. So something to keep in mind. And with that, we'll slowly wrap up. I wanted to mention that next week we're going to take a break and we're going to go to Mobile HCI, and hope to see you there. And then on October 15th, we'll welcome Duncan Brumby, and on October 22nd, we'll have Gersan Dilnaz. So looking forward to those two speakers as well. So with that, I'll stop the recording, and then if you can, please stick around for a more informal chat.
Thank you very much for having me.